Yeah, I was just gonna say. Can you, all right.
All right,
A
well,
second.
now we, yeah, just keep
Okay,
talking, I guess.
all right. Hello? Anybody here yet?
Looks like there's only, are we the one participating?
Yeah,
We
but,
won't be able to know until the end.
well, I need him to hear me now, then I know people can I can hear.
Whoa, you're way good.
Is it loud?
I think you're way good.
Is it really loud in here? Okay, so if I talk like this, it's better? Is that loud enough or too loud?
Well, I also, hold on.
Okay.
I also have my volume at max.
Okay, how about now? Is that too low? Loud enough?
No, we're good.
Good, okay, all right.
Yeah, you can hear just fine.
Could you put a note, do not come in?
Yeah, if I talk like this, it's better.
If I like this, yep, okay.
Please enter your name.
All right, we are going to get started. Good afternoon, my name is Ginger Cobcash. I'm Assistant Commissioner at New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection in the Office of Land Use Management. We're here today to conduct via webinar a stakeholder session regarding our up and coming public access rule writing. The department is undertaking the scripting of rules. On this slide, you will see that we have stakeholder meetings that we have set up through the summer of 2019. Proposal will be done in the winter of 2020 with an adoption anticipated in the winter of 2021. I want to back up for a minute here. I forgot to do a little bit of an introduction. We would like you to scroll down to the bottom of your screen, and there's a sign in. We'd like you to sign in your name, perhaps, and what municipality you're representing, so that we have a sense of the number of participants and where they're from. The major goals of this rule proposal will be to incorporate the new public access law, it's PL 2019 Chapter 81, into our coastal and our flood hazard rules. Currently, our coastal rules have provisions regarding public access, but our flood hazard rules do not. So this law is going to mean bigger changes to the flood hazard rules than we had seen before. The goal here is to redefine what public access means, add public access restrictions into the rules, provides standards when public access is required. And as the law states, examine all of our permit by rules, general permits by certification, and general permits to determine if an individual public access assessment needs to be conducted for those particular activities. And then we need to fold into our rules criteria regarding public access at marinas. The new law has very definitive standards with respect to marinas, and we want to make sure we've captured them as the rule or the law allows. So the law itself mentions what public access is. It means visual and physical access to and use of our tidal shores. And we also have historically allowed in our rules the ability to provide perpendicular access from an upland area to those shores to allow for that physical access. The law also added something that was that we had not had before, which is the necessary support amenities, including public parking and restroom, into the definition of what public access means. This last provision is probably the one that's of most interest to municipalities. So when is a public access examination required? When based on the way the law is written, it says when there is a change in the existing footprint of a structure, we shall do an individual public access assessment. It also says when there's a change in the use of the property, for example, from commercial to residential. And then also there should be a public access examination when there is a beach replenishment or beach and dune maintenance permit being processed. The last one on here is also, I think, another one where I think the municipalities are going to have be most concerned about, since many of these tidal municipalities do conduct beach and dune maintenance. What we'd like to get out of this session is what are the absolutes that people are looking from our different stakeholders. And if we don't get it today, if anybody who's participating goes back to their mayor or their council, want to send us questions, we'd be happy to get them, or comments. So we know that some people absolutely want to be added to the rule that if there is a change in the footprint of an industrial building, they want to make sure that we account for that in this rule provision, and that we reflect that in our final proposed language. For municipalities, I'm going to guess you probably would like to see something about what do we mean by public access required associated with beach and dune maintenance. So topics also that we have been discussing with our stakeholders are around public access in specific areas. So along the Hudson River waterfront, the department currently has very specific rule provisions on what public access amenities are required along the Hudson River waterfront. We have very prescribed standards. We've presently heard back from a number of the stakeholders that they don't want to see any changes to those provisions. So that's the kind of feedback that we're really looking for. Does everyone still want to see the Hudson River walkway requirements? For beach and dunes, we want to hear your feedback, especially the municipalities that border our ocean front. Any feedback that they want to give us regarding public access provisions dealing with beach and dune walkovers, for example. And then we have on here certain waterways. In previous rule proposals, we called out certain larger river water bodies as kind of special areas that we would like to see more amenities associated with. We'd like your feedback in, especially in the municipalities that border large tidal water bodies, if you would like to see anything in particular added to the rule. So topic for discussion is what types of projects require a review of public access and what type of projects do not require a review of public access. As I mentioned in an earlier slide, what we really want to hear from the stakeholders is exactly this. If, for example, at a particular parcel, an applicant wants to rebuild their bulkhead, and in the rebuilding of the bulkhead, they expand waterward in order to allow for that expansion to be done within the current rule structure. We call that, or refer to that as a bulkhead bump out. If an applicant wants to undertake that, do our stakeholders see that as a change in the footprint of the project? We haven't gotten a lot of feedback on that, and so if municipalities would like to provide us their feedback, that would be great. And then the types of projects that do not require review of public access. I think a great example of that would be in our current flood hazard rules, we have a lot of permit by rules for activities that a lot of municipalities undertake. Things like replacement of a culvert, from a corrugated metal culvert to a concrete structure. And that change may require a slight change in the footprint to the design. If that's the case, do municipalities want us to still require or view that as a project that would need an individual public access review? What is the threshold for requiring public access? The scale of the changes to the footprint of the use. Once again, we're trying to tease out, is it any change in footprint that our stakeholders want to see a need for an individual public access review, or is there some de minimis amount of work that a homeowner or a business owner or a municipality might want to undertake on a property that they own that they believe shouldn't require an individual public access review, meaning like you have to provide additional public access on your site because of this change in the footprint. We're also looking at the demand for public access in the area. We've heard in a number of the stakeholder sessions about you might be able to get to, for example, the beach, but you can't park, or there is parking restrictions in the form of timing. And we've also heard I can park, but there's not enough access points. So we are really reaching out to our stakeholders to help us informing when we need to ask for more public access amenities in a particular municipality. Other limits to public access. In the law itself, it's pretty clear that the public access needs to be provided on site when there is a change in the footprint or the change in the use, except for it does allow in marinas there to be the ability to provide public access at an off-site location that's equivalent access to what was being taken away by the marina, changing its footprint. There is also in the law certain types of activities that are not required to provide on-site public access. For example, if the facility is producing chemicals, there are certain provisions in the law that says under certain circumstances, there is not a requirement to provide on-site access. One of the things that we're exploring is it possible to potentially provide for an off-site public access? We're also open to discussions on timing restrictions that are associated with that on-site public access that is being provided. Should it be open all the time to the public? Are there limitations? And then another question that we are trying to answer is, how do you know if the proposed access is appropriate and sufficient? When must perpendicular access be provided? When must restrooms be provided? When must parking be provided? We've heard a lot from one of our stakeholder session about the need for more restrooms and more parking. Didn't hear a lot about perpendicular access. That seemed to be limited in certain municipalities. Didn't hear a lot about the back bay areas. Didn't get a lot of feedback on that, and also didn't get a lot of feedback in our urban waterways, the limitations that may exist in those areas, and perhaps how we can improve that through this rulemaking effort. The law itself mentions municipal public access plans as a way for the department to fulfill or have an applicant fulfill their public access requirement. It also adds in there the municipalities can add municipal public access plans into their master plan. So we are looking at ways to fold that into our rules and the best way to approach it. Currently, we have a limitation. If you want to get a beach and dune maintenance permit, you need to have a department-approved municipal public access plan. And we'd like municipalities' feedback on how well that works or how well it doesn't work. The problems associated with that. Does it really accomplish, I think, what we all wanted it to accomplish? We would like your feedback on that. Charging a beach fee, should we actually perhaps maybe tie it more to that, since there seems to be in some ways a cleaner link or a more appropriate link? If you're charging a beach fee, then provide to us, at least for the ocean front, what that public access looks like along that area that you're charging a beach fee for. And should there be potentially a link to Green Acres funding? The previous rule, there was mention of that. When we went and did an examination, there was really no follow through, but wondering if there's still an appetite to fold that into our rulemaking. Now, I've shifted pretty quickly through this presentation. The goal here is to entertain the questions that you may have and provide answers, and then once again, to really stoke, I guess, the conversation on public access and what the municipalities would like to see in this rulemaking so that they feel that they're part of the process. Now we're gonna take our first question. We don't have any. Okay. We're gonna wait a few more minutes to see if we get any questions. All right, our first question is, we'd like to see as little rulemaking as possible. Why not completely rely on municipal public access plans? Every town is different. Seaside Heights has unique circumstances, as do most other jurisdictions. I'm gonna there's a lot in this particular question. I'm gonna parse through it. So the law actually requires the department to undertake rulemaking. So that's why we have to go forward with this. And we appreciate the feedback. I think what you're getting at is particularly you'd like to see the rule not be very prescriptive. The municipal public access plan take unique circumstances into account. One size fits all. Regulations will ignore the realities on the ground in each community. This is part of that same question. So we certainly appreciate that. So I think what we're hearing from this particular municipality is they would like to have municipal public access plans and the requirement to fulfill the public access at a particular site to be accomplished through a municipal public access plan. We appreciate that feedback. The rules do not require that shipyards have to provide public access, correct? The law, we are going to actually repeat what we've been stating in all the stakeholder sessions, is we're going to fold into the rules the exact wording of the exemption as it's laid out in the law. And it's not just shipyards in general, it's certain types of facilities that hit certain bars, such as it's a homeland security risk to allow public access. But we're not going to stray from that. Next question is, how would these public access affect the Delaware Bay Shore? Well, public access would be required along the Delaware Bay Shore. It's a tidal water body. If somebody was proposing to develop a new use, change the existing use on that particular property, or change the footprint of the existing facility on a property that abuts the Delaware Bay Shore and any tidal water body, then they would have to do a public access examination at that location. And part of this rulemaking is to determine what that looks like. Would we be requiring for every property to provide perpendicular access? Is it a walkway? Could it be a multitude of different ideas, such as a boat ramp? As the first person who provided a question, they're looking at perhaps we provide the public access off-site at and fulfill what the municipality has asked as a way to address public access. Another question is, who is going to pay for these additional amenities? Who's going to pay for additional maintenance associated with amenities? Since the inception of municipal public access regulations to date, how many approved municipal public access plans are there currently in the entire state? Who and how are these access reviews going to be performed for a change in a footprint or a change in use? And then upon completion of the review, is it the state's position that they will place additional demands on property owners? So the first part of this question is, who's going to pay for these additional amenities? When an applicant submits for a permit under flood hazard or one of the coastal permits, and that project is adjacent to a tidal water body, that applicant will need to address public access. And if through that process the applicant decides to build a public access walkway in front of their property, how it gets maintained could be one of the things we address in this rulemaking. Currently, we don't have any provisions in our rules that talk about maintenance of the facility, but I think it's a very good question. And then since the inception of the municipal public access regulations, as many probably know, we have been going through some litigation since those rules were proposed and adopted. And there was a period of time where the state was pretty, we were not approving any municipal public access plans because our authority to do so was in question. So since that time, we've only approved only a handful of municipal public access plans. And we have probably about 20 in the queue that we are in the process of reviewing and assessing. And those, as I mentioned before, when an applicant comes in and needs a permit from DEP, that is when the change in the footprint or the change in use would be required to do an individual public access review. I have a question on here is, what about concessions at a beach? I think what you're asking is, can concessions at a beach be considered a public access amenity? Well, the department does have a general permit that allows in certain municipalities to do beach-related amenities, but we can certainly take a look at that comment to see if concessions at a beach might be something that we could add as a potential public access amenity. If I'm incorrect in understanding the question, please feel free to add more. So the question is, with beach replenishment, with our beach replenishment project upcoming in 2020, how can we be assured that we have an approved plan? Our plan is sitting and waiting for approval. How do we move forward? This is for the mayor of Cape May Point. We will certainly look into where that municipal public access plan stands and we understand your concern about making sure your plan is approved. I think the beach and dune maintenance, the beach replenishment projects that are undertaking already have approvals from the state of New Jersey. And if that project is being conducted under one of those approvals, we have already conducted our public access examination. Next question is, how would this affect new construction improvements on existing private marina? So new construction and improvements on existing private marina, the law is very prescriptive with respect to marinas. It was certainly respectful of the fact that marinas provide public access. There's kind of the everyman's public access to our tidal waterways. And there are really clear provisions in that law. We are going to just fold exactly what that law says into our rules and not change that too much. Next question is, our municipality has submitted a municipal public access plan. Oh, that's the same one. Okay, all right, sorry. How would permit fees be determined? Some DEP permits are based on the size of the property. The beach in Spring Lake is all one block and lot that is 2 miles long. Parking, restrooms, and handicap access are almost non-existent on the Delaware. Okay, these are two different questions on the Delaware Bay Shore. So to answer the first question about how would permit fees be determined, permit fees are, the structure is if it's a permit by rule, there is no fee. The fee, you just have to conduct the project consistent with the permit in the rule. General permits are a standard fee. When it comes to individual permits, the fee is based on size, just as you stated. So if you're applying for a general permit, then your fee is limited. But if it is one big lot and block, then you are correct in your assumption that the fee would be based on the size. Parking, restrooms, and handicap access are almost non-existent on the Delaware Bay Shore is the next question. This is by the DEP's own regulations. Will any regulations be relaxed to help facilitate public access? Great question. So what you're saying is basically that some of our current rules with respect to coastal hazards make it at sometimes difficult for communities to place restrooms. We'll have to take a look at that. I think that's an excellent question. And if you could provide a little bit more to our office, that would be terrific. I'm going to give you an email that you can send your questions to, or you can also feel free to reach out to Carrie Kirkflew, and she will certainly share them with us as well. We appreciate that feedback, that you think that our regulations make it more difficult to provide public access to the Delaware Bay Shore. Okay, the next question is regarding easements over street ends and access points, which has raised some concerns among adjacent property owners. The requirement has been described as necessary by a desire to eliminate the ability to vacate a street end. Wouldn't it be easier to acquire DEP approval by statute before a municipality could vacate a street end that provides access to a waterfront or beach? Certainly, we'll take that comment into consideration. And if you can offer up some additional method to accomplish the same goal, which is basically before a street end is vacated, that the department have a chance to take a look at that. Be happy to have it. Something that makes it easier for towns to move forward with municipal public access plans is, or any suggestions, always welcomed. Next question is, what about previously approved but not yet built dune crossovers? Will they now be considered a change of use under the new rules? Well, that's a great question. So when we were doing the review of our general permits by certification and our general permits as well as our PBRs, we were looking at things that the actual activity itself was a public access improvement. So I think what we're gonna end up at is that the crossover itself is a positive thing to providing more access to our tidal waterways, as well as ensuring that the beach or the dune itself is not destroyed in the process of people crossing to the waterway. Having a controlled access point is always a good thing. Next question is, should access areas be placed on a town's ROSI? That's a great question. We've certainly explored that as a possibility, as perhaps a way that we could, instead of requiring a conservation restriction, is folding these into the town's ROSI, but there are some limitations associated with that idea. If a town has never participated in the Green Acres program, then there is no ROSI, and that seems to be the case under some circumstances. So, are there any more questions? If you have any questions, I believe the email. Okay. If you have any further questions, we are going to please send them in now. In the meantime, Jill Aspinwall will take any questions that you may have later on, today, tomorrow, next week. She's typing in her email address now, which is jill.aspinwall@dep.nj.gov. All right, with that, I'm going to end our webinar. Thank you very much for everybody who participated. Once again, I want to encourage you to provide us any comments that you may have, any concerns. We really want to hear from the municipalities. We're going to try another, we're going to have another stakeholder session in the public hearing room later this, actually next month. And we're also going to once again reach out. Oh, we have one more question. Has any thought been given to separating the Atlantic coast and the Bay Shore areas? They're two very differently managed areas. That's a great question. I think I mentioned to you earlier in the presentation that under previous rulemaking, we did look at certain rivers differently than we did perhaps the ocean front. So I think that that's an excellent comment, and any detail that you can give us on how to differentiate the two, we would really appreciate that. Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor, for that comment. I also got another comment that our mayor was not able to attend. Will you have a replay of the webinar that he can listen to? We will have the webinar placed on DEP's website along with the recording of the webinar. So we'll have the presentation so you can take a look at it and then you can listen to the session. We also have on that web page all of our other stakeholder meetings, and you can listen in to those if your mayor would like. And Carrie Kirkflew is going to also send a link out to all the mayors to that page itself. to make sure that you can find it on the website. All right, well, thank you very much. We appreciate your time today and any feedback that you may have. Thank you.